Alright, welcome back to PsychRockCentral, where psych rock lives on. Today we're going to go through another all-time classic psych rock album, The Doors' self-titled from 1967. A little bit about the band. They were a psych rock band, mainly, formed in Los Angeles, 1965, making them one of the earliest psych rock bands. And although we can't really count a band like Velvet Underground as purely psychedelic rock, they were formed around the same time. They were doubly influential and controversial for their lyrics, their live performances, and their mainstream attitude, as well as their interviews and their vocals. Generally, the band's title comes from the Doors of Perception phenomenon, which is where you engage with psychedelic substances to open and enter a state of expanded consciousness, almost like you're opening the doors to your mind and into the existential infinity, almost. I'm not really very psychedelic, I'm not a hippie, I'm not that spiritual, but it sounds like the doors into perception, or at least the doors of perception, huge influence on the idea of psychedelic rock as a whole. The music. Alright, so this album, it's very, very simple. It's very laid back, not laid back, very bare bones in its structure. You have the guitar players, you have the bassist, you have the drums, the vocals, and an organ for added effect. There's a few other instruments related to the organ. There's a harpsichord. There's a couple of other similar string instruments, but generally it sticks to the basic because that's what the Doors does best. It sticks to the basics and surprises you with the songwriting rather than the instruments, which were heavily used around the time. Blends a myriad of influences for inspiration. It's not just, rock bands of yore. It's blues rock. It's the blues itself. It's romanticism. It's almost Baroque music. It's creative, daring, and imaginative all at the same time because of all of these different influences. Yet I don't think it ever sticks to one particular influence itself. You have all-time psychedelic rock classics like Break On Through to the Other Side, Crystal Ship, Soul Kitchen, 20th Century Fox. But then you also have longer, extended jams that are almost raga-like, which was also a developing style in the 60s thanks to Ravi Shankar and the Beatles. The longer tracks also sound more Baroque with heavier emphasis on the organ for melodic instrumentation, but generally, I think it's very creative in its tonality, its structure, its songwriting. I think the band is in full force on this album, and it really shows. My favorite track would be The End, which is this nearly 12-minute, almost psychedelic raga, which I think is one of the first of its kind. Not only that, it's insanely influential for its lyricism. Just Jim Morrison goes crazy on the lyrics. At one point, entering into an Oedipus complex, and he's gone on record later on, before he passed away, stating that the song itself is almost like a representation of stripping back to what matters. Basically fucking over everything else that isn't related to the self and the perception of the self, going back to the Doors of Perception, and sticking to what is known, sticking to what is. So there's a particular passage where there's a lot of Oedipus complex. It's like Jim Morrison wants to kiss his mother, he wants to have sex with his mother, and that is mainly, I'm going to bring it up here real quick, pardon the shitty production value. Okay, I can't find it. So, it's like fucking the mother is back to what Jim Morrison knows best. It's back to this sense of identity. The mother cultivated the sense of reality for Jim Morrison, so he's going back to that and going back to himself and opening the doors of his own mind. Good track, really fucking good. One of my favorite tracks of all time, honestly. Not just for rock, but for music in general. But let's close it off here. It's Baroque and perverse, this album. It focuses on brilliantly crafted, almost Baroque melodies tinged with dark, perverse lyrics on the drug culture of the time, sexuality, just mind expansion, perversion of the mind, perversions of society, like unrequited love, even in tracks like Crystal Ship and End of the Night. A lot of Baroque elements in its music that underplay, if not just completely extenuate, the perverse elements of the music and the lyrics. There's innumerable legendary psych rock tracks. I've already mentioned Break On Through, The End, Crystal Ship, Soul Kitchen, 20th Century Fox. There's also Light My Fire, which gives one solo to Ray Manzarek, the organ player. It's a fantastic organ solo. Honestly ranks as one of the best string solos in rock music for me. And there's also a guitar solo from the other guitarist of the band, whose name I forgot, unfortunately. It plays a lot more of like the rugged guitar solo, but it's also very melodic at the same time, which you'd never expect. But anyway, all of those tracks that I've mentioned permanently define both the sound and the identity of psych rock, which is very important, I think. Overall, I think it's an all-time rock masterpiece, not just for psychedelic rock, but for all of rock music in general. It set the gold standard for all of rock music and influenced countless generations of musicians. While the Doors were originally influenced by the Doors of Perception as a thematic concept, the Doors themselves opened the doors for all of music history to come. It opened the doors for rock music forever, basically. Overall, I would give it strong, very, very high 9 out of 10. One of the best psychedelic rock albums of all time. Might be like top 3 in my opinion. But I think that's going to do it. Like I've said on other videos, you can check out my personal blog, PsychRockCentral.ca, as well as my Rate Your Music profile page. Those are both in the YouTube header. I think they're somewhere on my YouTube channel. I can also link cards. I'm not really good with the cards thing, but you can check out my other plugs, my other social media platforms, if you want more psychedelic rock and rock music reviews in general. But I think that's going to do it for today. So, thanks YouTube. Peace.